And pipelines as well. Similarly, you need to harden the pipeline access. So obviously for Microsoft, we talk about Azure AD, and you can use Azure AD to kind of help you with seamless sign-on across many different different services on the internet. But you want to, like, in this context, right? So create Azure AD and device policies that are going to secure your development machines. For example, if a device gets wiped, you want to be able to if a device gets lost, you want this easy ability to actually wipe the device, right? And then ensure that all operations adhere, again, I mentioned several times, least privilege. So a privileged operation, right, means granting more privileged access, adding a user, changing build, deployment steps, etc. So you want to make sure that these actions are just what they need, nothing more. And you want to run a regular identity access management scan that is sort of double checking what level of access people have and kind of reviewing that, because things happen, someone needs to do their job really quickly and they get added, maybe temporarily it was intended extra access, or someone is in a hurry, but you just need to kind of review that to make sure that this access does not get out of control. And you want to obviously make sure you're using multi-factor authentication and like something like dual key or IT approval for privileged operations and like human-induced pushes like CI/CD pipelines. So you just want to have these extra steps, like just verification steps in there. So if you think about, I mentioned dual key. So dual key addresses like credential loss and malicious insiders. So you just need the extra bit in there just to prevent those kind of attacks. And the endpoints using needs some sort of protection, right? So like I mentioned, if a developer's laptop is infected by ransomware, if that gets inside and then you're doing all this work, maybe some other visibility to the secrets you're using, some other in your machine, maybe code, if you've been doing coding practice for whatever, if your machine is compromised, you're pretty much, it's kind of game over, right? So to protect endpoints, you need an advanced endpoint protection platform with next-gen AV, protecting against unknown zero-day malware, behavioral analysis, all that. And you want some sort of easy way to have detection and response against what's actually detected on the endpoint, right? And then inject identity early into the automation pipeline. So it's a key step in minimizing exposure of sensitive accounts and credentials. So from code, so replacing, you want those embedded into the code. So you want to replace those with just-in-time credentials to help reduce, threat surface, enterprise-wide risk, etc. So if you're using, say, Azure Key Vault, and you've got in the way you're doing this, and so they're only being generated when they're needed. The whole thing is sort of obfuscated and not really ever exposed. Don't do that later on. And if you do this, you kind of protect it from compromised credentials. Again, that's a lot of these attacks. At some point, there's just a failure in identity protection at some level, and then malicious insiders, and even some of just accidents. People make mistakes. And if you're looking here, so your organization should automatically detect and respond to suspicious activity. So I say suspicious, but even accidents, right? So it can be suspicious, but it doesn't mean malicious. So you need to be monitoring generally as well to kind of see all these activities that are happening. So you want to monitor for anomalous activities to identify and detect those that represent maybe nefarious intent, accidental intent, like could be mass repository cloning, people downloading a lot of stuff, deleting repositories, etc. Maybe you want to enable alerts for routing for security policy across your DevOps pipelines. Scan for identity management to ensure, like I mentioned earlier, that you are enforcing sort of least privilege across that. And then automating notification to developers if a token's been leaked, a secret's been leaked, credentials have been put in code or something like that. So, and if you do this, you get sort of, threats come in within, you get protected from that, and escalation of brute force attack or intrusion access. And here I've kind of put up a couple of examples. If you're using Sentinel, so Microsoft Sentinel has some, you can connect up some data sources and you can kind of get this visibility here. So I've got 2 links on the page there for how you can monitor GitHub, action occurring in GitHub, and so you can help monitor that with Sentinel to see what's going on from commit all the way to all your stages there, and then also further sort of supply chain investigations as well. So we've got data connectors there that you can kind of plug in and get this visibility. So if there's an accident, right, that didn't get blocked, at least you can kind of look at it and do something about it. You'll know, or you won't be completely surprised like a week later when there's a breach. And then just really quickly, if you are, developing, so in our environment, so cloud adoption framework, it's not just about explicitly about, migrating, the big picture. So it's a very good framework to help you if you are, migrating and developing applications in the cloud. We're going to carry the security methodology angle, and if you are literally designing workloads, so well-architected frameworks are, but Microsoft Azure well-architected framework that, if you're not familiar with that, that's got these 5 pillars. You can see the little circles there. One of which is security, and if you look at that, it actually talks about development from the very, very beginning. Like doing threat modeling to understand like what security concerns you need to be aware of for your specific application. It starts from the very basics all the way through to the end. Like if you are, like how you would actually secure the actual web application in terms of architectural frameworks too. So this is really good. It kind of covers end-to-end security for very specific workloads. So if you're not familiar with this, I really recommend having a look. It's very useful and kind of help ensure some sort of repeatability. But if you look at, I feel like kind of a unified solution for Microsoft that kind of unifies dev, development, and SecOps. And here's kind of the elements we've got here which do this. So this unified solution here makes sure that we're securing the developer workload as code is being created. You'll see that, and security operations as well, which tends to the code after it's actually been deployed into production. Those bits like Sentinel giving you those insights, etc. So when you look at the developer side, I'm not going to talk about all of it because I do deal more with security for my job than all of these areas. This is a bit more general, but if you look at obviously Visual Studio Code, it's great development environment. I personally just I use it a lot, even more for the JSON side as opposed to real code development myself. But you also have GitHub code spaces, right? Entire development lifecycle tool. Very easy to onboard developers in the team, work with contractors, etc. Then additional components like GitHub repos, GitHub Actions as well to help deploy your code. I've already mentioned GitHub. There's obviously the ADO, Azure DevOps versions of those as well, like Azure Repos, Azure Pipeline. And then we've got a GitHub Advanced Security in there, which gives you code scanning, secret scanning, dependency scanning. I've got like another slide on those topics. And then obviously ACR, container registry is so if you're using containers, which a lot of you probably are, so you're gonna, this has a lot of good security capabilities as well. It integrates with some of our tools like Defender for Cloud to give you the insights into potential container vulnerabilities. Then, of course, Azure software platform. But then when you look at actually the SecOps side, identity, stupid keys, Azure AD, not limited to just inside Azure, right? You can use this, extend it beyond Azure to give you that zero trust, security throughout your entire organization. Azure policy, if you think about Azure policy, so that kind of helps control activities across Azure generally. So you can almost any scenario where there's an action happening inside Azure. So you can have some Azure policy control to help either force the software deployment, block something adverse, or remediate, right? So it's very important. And then thinking about, we've got other features. So Key Vault, obviously your secrets, we will make sure that all of your secrets are being protected by Azure Key Vault. Maybe in combination with something like Private Link to ensure that the actual access is only able to be internally from trusted, approved endpoints. And then I feel like, so if you think about Defender for Cloud that really helps as well, even as a developer. So you have Secure Score, which gives you that sort of helps you kind of find out the big picture way to improve your security. Azure Security Benchmark. So Security Benchmark, actually the newest version has DevOps as a section in there, so it's still relevant for developers, and then even in terms of the application, right? So it helps you get that visibility into maybe how your application infrastructure should have been secured. And if you think about the applications themselves, web application firewall and distributed denial of service detection, leverage those controls, and then Azure Firewall. So all these here are kind of inside Defender for Cloud. It does offer some management capabilities for like firewall policies as well, benchmark, secure score. You can do a lot of that straight from inside Defender for Cloud, and even Azure policy, right? You can manage some elements of that from Defender for Cloud. And then Microsoft Sentinel gives you an overarching view of everything happening within the environment, so you can do something about it. And then these, my slide take over than I thought, but if you look at security stuff, if you look at all the way from pre-commit all the way through deploy, right, there's different bits you really need to focus on each one of those. So this slide could take a really long time. So, you think about threat modeling and pre-commit, you need your secure coding standards at the very start so that you are actually running your code properly in the first point, and making sure that you have peer review. So it's not just, not just one person writing the code, that you have, even in the best code in the world, sometimes people make mistakes, or maybe someone else has a different lens, right? You need the extra review of your code. And then commit, actually, some sort of code analysis. We got static code analysis at this stage to actually double check for like a lot of common issues that maybe could be improved within your code. Dependency management, you've got quite a few libraries you're probably pulling in, like, Log4j. There's a million, right? No one is writing every single aspect of their code. You're all going to refer to some sort of external library. And then credentials, again, making sure that you're not accidentally left some sort of credentials within the code itself, or left them within your config files. Then you think about CD side, the actual deployment, right? You want some sort of scanning of the actual infrastructure as code. When it actually gets deployed, you can be using template, Terraform, ARM, Bicep, whatever it is. But even though there's another chance for vulnerabilities to introduce to error, etc., you want to make sure you're actually scanning those templates too. Double check, cloud configuration, some sort of security acceptance check, right? So as part of the testing, make sure you've actually had some element of security as it should be when it's being deployed. And then when it's actually the final bit, once it's been deployed, right, you need that monitoring, and additional threat intelligence being pulled in, actually sort of you see the results, and maybe if vulnerabilities do get introduced over time, or maybe they're found out. So if you got that monitoring and using threat intelligence, you'll get that understanding that it appears that one of those libraries using is now has a detected vulnerability, right? So you can go back and then, all right, let's go back to the source, fix that code, then redeploy the whole thing and fix it. So if you don't know about it, you're not going to fix it, right? And so basically, again, build secure apps from the start. This sort of some of the Microsoft tooling again. I won't spend much time on that one to make sure we've got time for Q&A on this, but you can kind of see this is a bit more GitHub focused. How you can kind of leverage GitHub, obviously, to help build your apps from the start. You can also use ADL or whatever it is, but the key is that you want to have a few number of these controls being fixed, right? That you see here when you mention, like, I talk about like dependency scanning, etc. So again, this talks about GitHub Advanced Security, but it's just one tool. So the key is that, dependency scanning, those library dependencies, code scanning, the actual code itself, and then the actual secrets, the secrets in there. GitHub Advanced Security obviously one way, but if you get OWASP, I hope as a developer you are familiar with OWASP. So they even have a community, and they have some open source code analysis tools. I've seen a lot of people using them. The key is to make sure you are doing this at some level. Please don't just write your code and push it out without doing these activities. It isn't as onerous as it seems. And if you are using, I hope, if you're within Azure and you're using, say, Defender for Cloud as part of the overarching, sort of help tie some of this together, it gives you this basic posture protection. So again, we're talking about development, right? But you need to make sure your actual platform has protections in there. So if you as a developer are doing amazing work, even cloud security, right? But the actual platform itself that you're using has vulnerabilities, right? They're going to get in there and use that to get into you. So Defender for Cloud gives you that visibility about how your actual resources have been configured. So if MFA wasn't enabled properly, if someone, you got your application, it's been developed, it's been pushed, and it's got some data in the storage account, and someone forgot to lock that storage account down somehow, it'll let you know, right? And gives you, also has that mapping that everyone has a compliance requirement of some description, so you can kind of ensure that you are meeting those technical control requirements, like what you delivered is actually compliant for, say, SIS-20 or whatever you might need to be compliant with. And then it's got actual threat protection if you think about defense in depth. So again, if you have a web application and you want to make sure you've got that upfront protection like distributed denial of service, and then your web application firewall that kind of protect you from cross-site scripting, SQL injection, etc. But it also has like sort of end of the line threat protection capabilities, like the additional layer of protection at your storage account. It integrates with containers, so ACR, etc. So you can actually get an idea about potential vulnerability within your containers. So it gives you the extra visibility within, threat protection. And it's not limited just to Azure, right? If they're anywhere, you get that visibility. And then you want to do something about it, right? You can leverage logic apps, etc. So if there is an issue, you can be notified and boom, hopefully fix it automatically, or at least do something about it. And then again, secure score, maybe use developers don't care as much, but secure score just if your teams aren't familiar with it, just kind of helps you prioritize what to fix. You have a huge number of vulnerabilities. It's aware of it and recommendations across all the major cloud providers against these various categories, and it kind of tells you what's the most important to focus on first, because there might be 100 things, which one will give you the biggest improvement, right? It helps you prioritize that, and you can track it over time. And like I mentioned about, everyone has a compliance requirement, so you can get that visibility about how you're actually doing against various compliance controls. So, and one of those, is you developing your applications. So the entire end-to-end workflow, it's not just your code itself. If you go just to the CID, one element of the pipeline, that whole end-to-end, there's like a compliance application there. It's going to help you both beginning and after the fact, right? And then some of these like Azure Security Benchmark actually explicitly call out DevOps. And again, if you look at this, is again more architectural perspective. So the actual sort of protection side, it covers all of these layers. So not just compute, your databases, some elements in AWS and GCP, and then the service layers. So activities happen. So anytime there's an activity in Azure, and it goes to ARM, Azure Resource Manager. So everything behind the scenes is going through there. That gives you the extra protection within ARM, network activities, DNS, and then Key Vault. Obviously, any application developing today has a secret to some description, and it can be protected by Key Vault, I hope. And this gives you this extra level of protection about, where Key Vault is being accessed from, maybe if there's some activities which are not normal, etc. And again, so defending for containers. So if you are developing applications, they're using containers. So Microsoft Defender for Containers actually has integrated with the entire CI/CD pipeline as it relates to ACR, and also not just us, but EKS clusters and GCP ones as well. So you get all these capabilities here. We can put a link after the fact. We don't have lots of time. I think maybe yesterday's session maybe went through a bit more on visual security controls, but if you are using containers, this will really help kind of let you know if there's a vulnerability within containers. It's got broad support, etc., and help follow CS benchmark again. It'll really help make sure your container security has been improved. And again, I had GitHub integration. I got some screenshots here from my installation. So if you tick that on there, right, you basically they give you the authentication token, minor obscure, and you take those, you add them to your GitHub repository. And with this integration, it will give you some visibility to build registry container scan results. Like the sample here, I had one. So looking at this this one here, what we got, it realizes I probably got an older version of, looks like the Linux image I had inside the container had an older version of the bash shell. It needs an update to fix that vulnerability. And looks like Debian had a Python update as well. So it kind of lets you know if, that, hey, you deployed this, it was great a week ago or a month ago, but there's a really important big vulnerability now, you better fix that. So, and that will show up right in that main console within Defender for Cloud. And of course, if you have Sentinel with the overarching view, it will then get passed through to Sentinel. And I mentioned security, Azure Security Benchmark, so it actually has an explicit section now on DevOps security. You'll see like enforce security workload throughout the entire lifecycle, and it'll kind of tell you how to do that. So you can kind of see that. And quickly, so Azure Architecture Center, this is good for like getting you an idea for actual architecture level security, but I have a link here, so Dev Test Lab. So if you kind of want a bit of extra, assistance in kind of efficiently self-managing, your development test environment, right? So Detail basically helps you within teams efficiently manage VMs, PaaS resources, etc., without waiting for approval. So it's kind of it's a bit separate, but you still get all of these different areas you can focus on. You see within this, I kind of copied the DTL architecture there so you can see it. I think I can post a link later. So it's a bunch of like building lab policies, thresholds, helping reduce costs. is a whole bunch of concepts. I'll paste that. So if you are familiar with it, it's worth knowing. But one thing that's really, I think, important for testing is you really need to test everything, even like the identity side. So it's often really good for your pure testing of like a completely separate Azure AD tenant. So you can test out Azure AD roles, etc., delegation, and all of this without actually impinging on production tenant, right? And let's see, so we got DTL, you'll mention the DTL. Yeah, I'll just post a link to DTL, I think, so you got an actual time for any Q&A you might have.